So now we're going to be covering the exam review for the third exam review rather for chapter 7 through 9. So shall we begin? So starting with chapter 7, choosing the source of credit, the cost of credit alternatives. First, we're looking at the source of consumer credit, but some things to keep in mind as we kind of go through this. Financial institutions are the source of credit and come in all shapes and sizes. They play, as we said before, an important role in our economy in order to credit provides the, how do I want to say it, the lubrication to make the machine work properly, if you will. And they can offer a wide, broad range of financial services. So before we decide whether or not to borrow money, we have to ask ourselves three basic questions, and there are more, but we'll stick with these three. One, do I need a loan? Secondly, can I afford that loan? Third, can I actually qualify for that loan? So we'll endeavor to go through this as we walk through this review. So what kind of loan should you in fact seek? Their first would be inexpensive loans, would be starting with family, hopefully inexpensive. Parents or family members borrowed money borrowed from, from parents, family members, also money borrowed on financial assets held by a lending institution, meaning collateralized loans and so on and so forth. Medium price loans, a little more expensive, typically coming from commercial banks, Bank of America, et cetera, credit unions, so on and so forth. New car loans may cost up to 6 to 8%, sometimes even more, but with the very low interest rates, you can get them significantly lower than that, at least for the time being. It all depends upon where the interest rates are at. Used car loans and home improvement loans may cost slightly more. And then moving upward to expensive loans, the most expensive loans are available from finance companies, household finance corporation, retailers, and banks through credit cards. Again, credit card interest rates are typically quite high. Finance companies often lend to those who cannot obtain credit from those other resources, the less expensive loans, if you will. And interest ranges can go from anywhere from, we'll just say, this is again rule of thumb, single digits up through 25, 30%. They can get very, very expensive. So onward. When we start talking about the actual cost of credit, there are things that are going back to what's called the Truth in Lending Law of 1999. It requires creditors to state the cost of borrowing as a dollar amount. So two concepts to remember are the finance charge and also the APR, or the annual percentage rate. So starting with the finance charge and the APR, the finance charge is kind of the total dollar amount paid to use credit. It includes interest costs, service charges, credit-related insurance premiums, and appraisal fees, whereas the APR expresses that cost, if you will, as a percent. So the APR, or the annual percentage rate, is the percentage cost or relative cost of credit on an annualized basis. And APR, this is one. When comparing various credit options, you always want to know what your APR is. So it's the key to comparing those credit costs. All creditors must state the cost of their credit in terms of both the finance charge, the dollar charge, if you will, out the door cost, and also the APR, the annual percentage rate. So looking at the trade-offs that are associated with this, that term versus interest cost, the longer the term for a loan at a given interest rate, the greater the amount that must be paid in interest charges is in general, we're saying. Lender risk versus interest rate, the greater the risk for the lender, the higher the cost of credit. That's just, it goes without saying. And variable interest rate is a secured loan, for example, a large down payment. Shorter term loans are, generally speaking, less expensive. So again, variable interest rate loans, secured loans, meaning that they're secured, collateralized against, there is some collateral, something you've taken a mortgage, it's against the value of that home, if you will. Putting a large down payment down it increases your stake and reduces the risk to the lender. This is all we're talking about. And again, shorter term loans tend to be less expensive. So if you're borrowing to buy a car, if you can afford it, in most cases you're better off at getting it for 2 years or 3 years, 24 months or 36 months, as opposed to 48 months, 60 months, 72 months. You get the idea. So the shorter the term, the less expensive it's going to be. So now we're on to calculating the cost of that credit. The two most common methods of calculating interest are compound and simple interest formula. Simple interest is the interest computed on principal only and without compounding, without adding, on in consecutive periods, if you will, the cost, if you will, the interest. It is a dollar cost, therefore, of borrowing money. It's kind of a short way of expressing it. It's a dollar cost of borrowing money. The simple interest rate formula is very straightforward. As interest is equal to price times that interest rate times the time that's involved. The APR formula, on the other hand, is a little more complicated, not much. So, for example, in this case, we would have, you can walk through this in the book, but I'll just express the formula. APR, annual percentage rate, is 2 times N times 1 over P, open parent, N plus 1 closed parent. And so the takeaway from that is that when more than one payment is made on a simple interest loan, the method of computing interest is also known as the declining balance method. Add-on interest. When add-on interest method is used, interest is calculated on the full amount of the original principal. Creditors use various systems to calculate the balance on which they assess those finance charges. The adjusted balance method, these are all different categories, if you will. The adjusted balance method, where finance charges are added after subtracting payments during the billing period. And these changes, just the way in which these calculations are done, it can alter significantly the cost, if you will, that would be associated with this credit. So again, the previous balance method, where creditors give no credit for payments made during the period. The average daily balance method, where creditors add your balances for each day in the billing period, then divide by the number of those days in the period. So anyways, lenders seeking to protect their purchasing power add expected rate of inflation to the interest they charge. This is a moving target, if you will, oftentimes. Always, I should say. Cost of credit and tax considerations. The Tax Reform Act of 1986 did not affect the deductibility of home mortgage interest, but beginning in 1991, you could no longer deduct interest paid on consumer loans. So interest paid on credit cards, so on and so forth, are not tax deductible. So when the repayment is early, this is called the rule of 78. Creditors use this rule of 78, is called the sum of digits, to determine how much interest has been paid at any point in a loan. The truth in lending law requires that creditors disclose whether or not they're entitled to a rebate of the finance charge if the loan is paid off early. So it has to be stated explicitly. If you have a loan outstanding for 48 months, for 4 years, and you pay it off in 2 years, it has to be stated explicitly in the terms of that loan agreement as to whether or not you are on the hook, if you will, for paying off the full amount of interest, the 4 years worth, or if you pay it off early, you're not subject to any sort of a penalty, which is, at any rate, you get the idea. Credit insurance. So credit insurance insures the repayment of a loan in the event of such things as death, disability, or loss of property of the borrower. It can be pretty expensive, but it's something to also consider. The lender is named the beneficiary and directly receives any payment made on submitted claims. the Cost of Credit and Credit Card Accountability, Responsibility, and Disclosure Act of 2009. A lot of words, right? And these are all stipulated within the framework of that. These are all different acts at the federal level, and there are different ones for the state of Michigan as well. But looking at it just from the federal level, if you will. So, looking at moving on, we're looking at managing your debts, and the FTC. This is where the FTC really comes. Or excuse me, let's start before we do that. If you cannot make your payments, this is kind of an overview, if you will. Cannot make your payments, contact creditors at once. This is always the case. To try to work out a modified payment plan with them. Do not wait until your account is turned over to a debt collector. So contact them early and often, if you will. So the actual debt collection processes that are involved, it all starts with the FTC, or the Federal Trade Commission, which enforces the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, which prohibits certain practices by agencies that collect debts from creditors. So warning signs of debt problems. These are all things that we either are, they're, for the most part, I should say, they're fairly straightforward and things that you would expect, you would think of when you're thinking of warnings, signs, so it says with debt problems, referring to the overall, in general, we're talking about the overall indebtedness as a nation. How do I want to put this? So debt is probably the number one source, if you will, of a family's financial problems. This is overall, nationally, et cetera. Nothing has changed in that regard over the years. Nationally noted economists listed the following, if you will. This is coming from like a Kiplinger's type of magazine, but they're pretty straightforward. Emotional problems, the use of money to punish, the expectation of instant comfort, keeping up with the Joneses. These are all these things that affect us in terms of going into debt, and the warning signs that are associated again with that. Expensive indulgence on children, making up for time that you don't spend with your children by buying things for them, for example. Misunderstanding or lack of communications between spouses and so on and so forth. And very much a lack, if you will, of the understanding of the amount of the finance charges as they present themselves, just not having a good handle on what the consequences of going into that debt are. So the serious consequences of that debt, excessive indebtedness may result in such things as spousal abuse, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, and the list goes on and on and on. But help is always available for people that need this, to deal with these issues. So, for example, we're looking at Consumer Credit Counseling Services. So Consumer Credit Counseling Services is local, typically, nonprofit organization affiliated with the National Foundation for Consumer Credit. It provides debt counseling services for families and individuals with serious financial problems. And so this is out there and available to people that run into problems in dealing with debt. So we're focusing specifically on what the CCCS does, the Consumer Credit Counseling Service. What they actually do is that, for one, they aid families with serious debt problems by helping them to manage their money better and through education. Education. You can't get away from that. Anyone overburdened by credit obligations can phone or write, or typically online now, or can go right into a credit counseling, a Consumer Credit Counseling Service location. And there are a number of them out there available to everyone, really, is what it comes down to. It requires that an application for credit counseling be filled out, and then an appointment is arranged for a personal interview with the applicant. So they go through a very specific process, filling out forms, and kind of get you into that mode of kind of taking ownership, if you will, is what their drive is. So there are alternative counseling services. Counseling services are also available from universities, colleges, military bases, credit unions are a great source. Other local municipalities, communities typically have credit counseling services. County extension agents and state and federal housing authorities are also very good sources. So this is we're moving from acknowledging your debt, dealing with how to remedy, how to get yourself out of debt, and this last piece, if you will, is if you're unable to do so, it's declaring personal bankruptcy. So debt burden, unemployment, divorce rates, and household net worth are all indicators of personal bankruptcy. However, the Bankruptcy Recovery Act of 1978, which made personal bankruptcy easier, is also considered an important cause of increases in personal bankruptcy, meaning that by making it easier to declare bankruptcy, more people do what? They declare bankruptcy is really what it comes down to. The Bankruptcy Abuse and Prevention and Consumer Protection Act of 2005 kind of turned the tables on that a bit. So in Chapter 7, we talked about bankruptcy. A bankruptcy is a debtor is required to draw up a petition listing his or her assets and liabilities. So you one way or another, you can't get out of this, taking ownership of this. So this is something to keep in mind. So in Chapter 7 bankruptcy, it grants a debtor a chance to make a fresh start, if you will, in life. Whereas Chapter 13 bankruptcy is the debtor is with a regular income proposes to a bankruptcy court a plan to extinguish his or her debts from future earnings. So two different types, Chapter 7 or Chapter 13. So Chapter 7 pretty much erases, they're both about erasing your overall debt or reducing your overall debt. But one is more of a nuclear option, if you will, than the other. So the effect of bankruptcy on your job or future credit, different people have different experiences in obtaining credit after they file a bankruptcy case. Some find obtaining credit more difficult. The bankruptcy laws themselves prohibit the employer from discharging simply because you have filed the bankruptcy case. Should a lawyer represent you in a bankruptcy case? Absolutely should. But anyway, although it is possible to reduce costs by purchasing legal forms in a local stationery store, etc., completing them yourselves or online forms, an attorney is strongly recommended. In fact, I would say wholeheartedly, I would agree with that. Have an attorney. It's even though it's not an inexpensive proposition, you definitely need an attorney if you are going to be filing for bankruptcy. So onward, Chapter 8, Consumer Purchasing Strategies and Legal Protection. Consumer buying activities, we'll start with that. Financial implications, if you will, of consumer decisions. Your daily buying habits are affected by a wide variety of things that we've already talked about, economic, social, and personal factors. There's just a ton of things that impact that. Opportunity cost of daily buying decisions are commonly overlooked trade-offs. And again, these are things that back to the beginning of this, early on in this course, when you start talking about budgets, it's observing, evaluating, reviewing, decision making, and then starting back over again. All those things that we had talked about before. So they're higher cost when you buy on credit. This goes without saying. So opportunity cost, again, the decisions are commonly overlooked, and the trade-offs that would be associated: higher cost when you're buying on credit, buying poor quality items. The price might look right, but is it something that's going to last you? And we've all had that experience. And recently I just bought a pair of boots for the winter and to replace the other boots that I had for a number of years. So I threw out my old boots. My new boots were going to last me a long time to come, and they did not make it through the winter. Such is life. And the problem was, of course, that I got a good deal on the boots, but as often is the case, sometimes when the deal seems to be good, too good to be true, it typically is. So buying brands that, again, they're difficult to obtain repair service for, and especially today in our society, it's we don't repair appliances, we replace them. So we always have to think about these things when we're buying something quality. Is it going to last you, as in the past, it may have lasted 5 or 10 years. Today it might last 1 or 2 years. So you've got to think about these things when you're making those purchases. Buying by mail to save time and money, but having difficult time returning the item as a result. Using time and effort, because at any rate, I needn't go into examples over that, but you get the idea. Using time and effort to comparison shop. There's a lot that's involved with this. The wise purchasing strategies, onward we go, right? Various shopping techniques should be considered for various purchasing situations. So timing those purchases, for example. Many people save time by buying holiday items and other products at reduced prices in late December and early January when retail sales are low, after Christmas sales, so on and so forth, right? Buying winter clothes in the spring, etc. Bargains can be obtained by buying, again, winter clothing in midwinter or late winter, or buying in summer, or buying summer clothes late in the season, or etc. Purchase location. Your decision to shop at a particular store is influenced by the variety of merchandise and the quality of brands, the number of substitutes that are available. All these things are very important, which is another reason why online shopping has become such a boon and a good thing for the consumer, is that we have more options. The more options that we have, the more substitutes available, the better off we are, because that's when you have competition that kicks in. It's also important to note that the store's policy, what their store's policies rather are with regard to such matters as check cashing, exchanges, and frequency of sales, etc. So brand comparison. Comparison shopping is the process of considering alternative stores, brands, and prices. In contrast, impulse buying is basically it's unplanned purchasing, just going out there and buying something. While some impulse buying may be acceptable, too much can cause financial problems. And this is, again, these are all things to consider. Brand name products are highly advertised items that are available in many stores. Store brand products sold by one chain of stores are low-cost alternatives to store brands. Are all very familiar with this. Generic items, plain packaged, non-brand items provide a low-cost third choice, or typically they are also the store brand products that are out there available to you. Labeling information. Federal law requires that a label on all food products contain information on the common name of the product, the name and address of the manufacturer, the net weight, and the unit cost, if you will, of the item. Product labeling for appliances include information on operating costs and assist you in selecting the most energy efficient models. And there are always resources out there available, consumer reports, etc. Open dating tells consumers about their freshness or shelf life of perishable products, sell-by dates, and so on and so forth, right? So onward, price comparison. Price comparison. Unit pricing, again, uses standardized unit of measure to compare the prices of packages. Different sizes, packages, price per ounce, for example, price per pound, price per unit. The process of calculating unit prices is as follows. Step 1, determine the common unit of measure, such as ounces, again, or number sheets, etc. Step 2, divide the price by the number of common units, and it's all very straightforward. Compare those unit prices for the various size, brands, etc. when you're going through. Remember that the packaging with the lowest unit price may not always be the best buy, since it may contain more food than you would use before it's spoiled. Buying half gallon of milk might be more expensive on a per unit basis, but if you only use a half gallon of milk for over 2 weeks, for example, then you're better off rather than buying a full gallon and throwing away a half gallon. Anyways, you get the idea. Onward, warranties. Warranties are a written guarantee from the manufacturer or distributor of a product that specifies the conditions under which that product can be returned, replaced or repaired. How you. This is something that's very specific. An express warranty, usually in a written form, is created by the seller or manufacturer. Can be a full warranty or a limited warranty. Express meaning it's written, it's putting down in front of you, explicitly saying or expressing what is covered and length of time that is covered. An implied warranty is a result of the product's intended use or other suggested understandings that are not in writing. An implied warranty, you take something home and it's something that the implication is that it would last you more than a day or two before it breaks down. So this is part of the implied warranty that would go along typically in conjunction with an express warranty. But anyways, you get the idea. There are implied warranties that go along with pretty much every product. Used car warranties. The FTC requires businesses that sell used cars to have buyers' guide stickers placed on those vehicles. So it's not just on new cars, but it's also on used cars. The disclosure must state if the car comes with a warranty or as is, and what is the specific protection. Typically, for used cars, it's 60, 90 days, unless otherwise stipulated on the sticker, if you will. While a used car may not have an express warranty, most states have implied warranties that protect the basic rights of used car buyer, meaning that if you drive off the lot and it breaks down, the vehicle breaks down, then that's kind of part of the implied warranty, no matter what, even if it's an as-is vehicle. New car warranties. So moving from used to new cars, new car warranties provide buyers with some assurance of quality. These warranties vary in time, mileage, etc. Typically, for a new car, it's 3 years or 36,000 miles, so 12,000 miles a year, kind of a bumper to bumper for new vehicles. And you can buy, again, moving onward to service contracts. So a service contract is an agreement between business and consumer to cover the repair cost of a product. While some are called extended warranties, well, sometimes they're called extended warranties. They're not really warranties. For a fee, they insure the buyer against losses due to the cost of certain repairs. Very explicit. Automotive service contracts can cover repairs not included in the manufacturer's warranty. Service contracts can range anywhere from a few $100 to several $1,000s. They don't always include everything you might expect, so you have to be very careful because of cost and exclusions. Service contracts you have to be very, very careful of. You have to, and depending upon what it is that you're looking for, what your objective is, you have to again be very, very careful of these service warranties because they have many, many, many exclusions typically. Okay, anyway, so onward. Major consumer purchases when you're buying motor vehicles, right? A specific decision-making process can help with making those effective purchases. So phase one, the pre-shopping activities. This is for vehicles, appliances, and we go through this typically with every purchase to some degree, to one degree or another. So the objective decision maker must start with a planned course of action, define your shopping problem in terms of a broad perspective, if you will, and keep in mind that information is power. The more informed you are, as someone once told me, the better mechanic you are, the better your chances of getting the quality service when you have your car brought in for service, for example. So the better informed you are, the more likely you are to make the purchasing choice that best serves your own interest. The main sources of consumer information are personal contacts, business organizations, advertising, labels, sales personnel, media information from TV, radio, newspaper, magazines, independent testing organizations such as the Consumers Union or Underwriters Lab. You always see the laboratories, you see the UL sign. Governments or agencies, and the one that we all use would be online sources. Just Google it, right? These are things that we do to compare. These are things that we're in the actual pre-shopping activities before we step into a showroom or whatever. So evaluation of the alternatives, that's phase 2. Each alternative needs to be evaluated on the basis of such factors as like personal values and goals, available time and money, the cost of each alternative, the benefits of each alternative, and your specific needs, if you will, with regard to the product size, quality, quantity, features. The list goes on and on and on and on. So as you research various consumer purchases, if you will, you'll need to identify attributes that are important to you, is what it boils down to. Research studies that have been done out there shows that the price variation can occur from all type of products. The price of aspirin, for example, may range from 50 cents to over $3 for similar items, depending upon where you're purchasing those items, if you will. So you can benefit from comparison shopping when you're buying expensive. Certainly, the more expensive the item, the better off you are by doing more comparison shopping. So again, buying expensive, complex items, buying items you purchase often, having a good sense of, we don't go out and most people, when you buy gasoline, you make sure you're aware of what the prices are at your local gas stations. You may just pop into one and you find that you go down the block and it's 10, 15, 20% less expensive. You catalog that, put that in your mind, and you take that necessary steps next time around, passing up that first gas station and seeing how the prices vary from station to station. Comparisons can be typically done fairly easily using ads, catalogs, online sources. Different sellers offer different prices and services associated with those products. Product quality or prices, again, always vary significantly. So selecting your vehicle options, again, for example, optional equipment can be grouped into 3 categories. 1, devices to improve performance and ease of operation. Secondly, to comfort and convenience options. And thirdly, number 3, features that add to the vehicle's visual appeal, if you will. So kind of going from that hierarchy of needs, if you will. So if you're looking at the mechanical piece of it, convenience, and then the actual visual appeal of the vehicle itself. So comparing used vehicles, common sources of used vehicles include new car dealers where they offer late model turn-ins for lease turn-ins and so on and so forth. And you may be able to get a warranty. It usually means a higher price than other sources, so you tend to pay a bit higher at a new car dealership than you would at some other facilities. Most used car dealerships tend to have an older stock of vehicles, older vehicles in general. Warranties that are offered will be limited. However, the price will be reflected in lower sticker prices, if you will, than in the new car establishments. Individuals selling their own cars can be a bargain if the vehicle is well maintained, for example. Few consumer protection regulations apply to private party sales. Caution is always suggested. If you know who the person is and you trust them, that makes things much, much easier, but you never know. Private vehicle sales you can typically get a very good deal, but you don't know until after you've had the vehicle for a while whether it was a good deal or not. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Other sources: auctions and dealers sell automobiles previously owned by businesses, auto rental companies, government agencies, used car superstores such as CarMax is the big one out there. Offer large inventory of previously owned vehicles. Online used car businesses, dealernet.com. What is another one? America's automall.com. There are a number of them out there. Then there's what we talk about, the certified or CPO vehicles, certified pre-owned vehicles, are nearly new cars that come with the original warranty and sometimes a bit more. So these are typically, when you were talking about certified pre-owned, this would typically be coming from, if it's a Chevy product, be coming from a Chevy dealership where they go through the vehicle, if you will, with a fine-tooth comb, and it's certified, meaning that it's up to snuff for their standards for the type of vehicle, the mileage, and so on and so forth. And they tend to be a bit more expensive than other similar used vehicles. So finally, we're looking at leasing a motor vehicle. Leasing is a contractual agreement with monthly payments similar to buying a vehicle, but you're renting the vehicle with monthly payments for the use of the automobile over a set period of time. The main advantages, if you will, of leasing include only a small cash outflow may be required for the security deposit. It all depends. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to me, but sometimes there are several $1,000s upfront costs that will be associated with it. However, having said that, monthly lease payments are usually lower than monthly financing payments. They better be. The lease agreement provides detailed records for business purposes, and you're usually able to obtain a more expensive vehicle more often, is really what it boils down to. Major drawbacks: no ownership or interest, if you will, in the vehicle. You don't own the vehicle, you're just renting it, you're borrowing the vehicle. A need to meet requirements similar to qualifying for credit. You go through the same process in terms of going through the credit application process, right? Additional costs may be incurred so if you've got a lease that, say it's a 3-year, 36,000 mile lease, and you turn your lease car in after 3 years and you've got 40,000 miles, you're 4,000 miles over. And so there's a per mile fee that would be associated, would be a penalty, if you will, that would be added on to it. So, there are other things. So in leasing, you arrange for the dealer to sell the vehicle through a financing company. As a result, you be sure you know the true cost, including the capitalized cost. This is which is the price of the vehicle itself, the money factor, which is the interest rate being paid on the capitalized cost, the monthly payment, the number of payments involved, the residual value or whatever's left over, the expected value of the vehicle at the end of the lease. After the final payment, you may return or keep or sell the vehicle, is really what it boils down to. So now we're looking at determining the purchase price, and so negotiation of price of maybe with vehicle price may be possible in a buying situation. When you have negotiation of the price may be possible if in the buying situation you have all the necessary information about the product and buying the product that you're actually looking at. Secondly, you deal with a person who has the authority to give you the lower price or additional features, such as the owner or the store manager. This is something that is very important, because if you, for example, you walk into a new car dealership and you have a salesperson. Salesperson puts you in a vehicle, so you found the vehicle that you want, so on and so forth, and when the negotiation of the price is concerned, what often happens is that someone else is brought in, the finance manager, etc. And this is something that to keep in mind, is that the negotiation process begins with the finance manager. It's not with the salesperson, etc. Right? The salesperson is just trying to do what? Put you into that vehicle. Anyway, used car price negotiation. So when we're looking at used cars, you can begin to determine a fair price by checking ads and comparison shopping. Kelley Blue Book, so it's kbb.com, for example. Several published sources also list current prices for used cars. The basic price of a used car is also influenced by the number of miles, special features, options, whether or not the vehicle has been taken care of, meaning that there's a service record that's available for you to review. So now we're looking at price bargaining for new cars. So the sticker price is the suggested retail price, MSRP, manufacturer suggested retail price. This is prominently displayed on all cars, on all new cars for sure, where it's lists all the options and so on and so forth, and tallies up the price, if you will. That's the sticker on the side of the car. So information about dealers' costs may be obtained from several sources, including online sources typically. So you start your price bargaining by comparing prices of similar automobiles at several dealerships. Use dealer cost information in your efforts to get a vehicle price that is only a couple $100 over the dealer cost. So it's tough to try to figure that piece out, but it's important. Lowballing occurs when a new car buyer is quoted at a very low price and add-on cost increase before the deal is concluded. So always see the ads. A vehicle is out, it's only $19,999, and then you walk into the dealership and you find out that yes, that is the price, $19,999. However, there are other costs that are kind of thrown on top of that. That's lowballing. Highballing occurs when a new car buyer is offered a very high price for a trade-in vehicle, with the extra amount being made by increasing the price of the new car. So they offer you a high price for your trade-in vehicle, but then they charge you a high price, higher than what would normally be the competitive price for the new vehicle that you're buying. All these things are ploys, if you will, in the dealership. Things to be cautious of. So comparing those, now we're moving on to comparing financing alternatives. Car loans are available from banks, credit unions, finance companies, other financial institutions. A lot of them out there. The APR is the best indicator of your true cost of credit. Keep that in mind. You always need the APR, or the annual percentage rate. Okay, so looking now at post-purchase activities after you've already considered what's going to go in after you purchase a vehicle. There's maintenance and ownership cost may be associated with the purchased item. In some situations, you may not be satisfied with the purchase. There's a wide variety of grounds for complaint when that they obviously can occur in different ways that a buyer has to kind of remedy that situation, if you will. So onward, automobile servicing sources. Your driving cost will vary based on two main factors: the size of the automobile and the number of miles you drive. The largest fixed expense associated with a new car car purchase is depreciation. It reflects the loss of in the vehicle's value over time and use, if you will. Another fixed cost of ownership is the interest charge for the financing an automobile purchase. Other fixed costs associated with automobile purchases are insurance, license, registration fees, and taxes that would be associated. Since fixed costs are fairly constant, they are easier to anticipate than variable costs. Expenses related directly to the operation of the vehicle. Again, these are the variable costs: oil, tires, maintenance, repairs, replacement parts, brakes, so on and so forth. Various suspension parts that will be replaced over time. Consumable items, if you will, belts and hoses and so on and so forth. So anyways, an awareness of the total cost of owning and operating an automobile can be valuable. It's indispensably valuable, in fact, for overall finance planning. So the motor vehicle maintenance, people who sell, repair, drive automobiles for a living, state that regular vehicle care is is one of your best investments, meaning cheap insurance is really what it is. So the systems of your car that should be monitored and maintained on a regular basis are basically the engine cooling system, so the whole car really, the engine cooling system, transmission, brakes, steering mechanism, exhaust components, and suspension. And again, that covers a humongous portion of the vehicle. But you have to keep track of these things and they have to be maintained. Um, if not, the vehicle, you'll end up with a car that won't last you as long as otherwise would be the case. At any rate, automobile servicing sources, the service department of a car dealer offers a wide range of car care activities. Their charges are generally higher than other service locations. So when we say car dealer, these are new car dealers. Local gas stations, independent repair shops are available. Mass merchandise retailers like Sam's Club or Walmart, typically those types of places, specialty shops, tire stores, etc. Many individuals avoid repair fraud problems and minimize costs by working on their own vehicles. It's plain and simple, being your own mechanic, if you will. So onward, resolving consumer complaints rather. Every business transaction is a potential problem, and that kind of goes without saying. Most customer difficulties are the result of defective products, low quality, short product lives, unexpected cost, and poor repairs. You will probably never be completely satisfied with every purchase you make. This goes back to something I may or may not have said earlier on, but when buyer and seller comes together, when that transaction occurs, that is the agreed upon price. And typically speaking, neither the buyer nor the seller are entirely satisfied. And after the transaction takes place, we end up with buyer's remorse or seller's remorse. And this is just the nature of markets, if you will, in general. So there's nothing different in this regard either. So at any rate, so again, you'll probably never be satisfied with every purchase you make. How could you be? Based on what I just mentioned, it's just the nature of things. Process for resolving differences, there are 4 different phases, if you will. The initial, if you're really truly dissatisfied, initial communication with the company that's involved. Again, communicating with the company, that's 2. Third, consumer agency assistance, and 4th, final would be legal action, bringing lawsuits and so on and so forth. Mediation is often involved with is the involvement, if you will, of an impartial third party who tries to resolve the differences between a customer and business through discussion and negotiation. Next step, if mediation doesn't work, or if there's some movement, or if there's not enough movement, it moves on to the arbitration phase rather, and that's the settlement of differences by a third party. So the arbitrator whose decision is legally binding. So mediation, non-legally binding; arbitration, legally binding; and lastly, many state and local federal governments are available to assist consumers in all of these matters, if you will. So the 4th, the legal options for the consumers. If all previously mentioned avenues of action fail to resolve a consumer complaint, legal action may be appropriate. You can go to small claims court. So if it gets past mediation and arbitration, you can end up in court. You can end up in small claims court. In small claims court, a person may file a claim for legal matters involving amounts under a set limit within the state, etc. It's usually a few grand. To make best use of small claims court, the following tips are suggested: become familiar with the location, procedures, and filing fees. Usually the filing fees they might seem low, $5 up to $50, but if your claim does not amount to much more than that, anyways, these are all things to consider their cost. Observe other cases to learn more about the process if you have time to put into this. Present your case in a polite, calm, and concise manner. More public speaking, right? This causes many people to shy away, frankly. Submit evidence such as photographs, contracts, receipts, other documents. Use witnesses who can testify on your behalf. Class action lawsuits. So this is the first. It's small claims. There's class action lawsuits, and class action is when you join others in filing a lawsuit, if you will, against a single entity, a single company, right, if you will. So the last, of course, would be using a lawyer. By using, I shouldn't say the last, but deciding when to use a lawyer is difficult in general. Most legal counsel is not really required, but for more complicated matters, it's probably advisable, if you will, if the cost if it's the cost is justified, it's worthwhile seeking some legal assistance. Other legal alternatives, legal aid societies often will step up, and also if your employer has a prepaid legal services program, this is a benefit, a legal plan benefit, if you will, through your employer. These are also good options. And lastly, personal consumption protection. The consumer protection devices are of no value unless the person, frankly, is aware of them and makes use of them when seeking information or resolving a problem. It's really what it comes down to. So there's a mouthful with that one, but we're moving on from car purchases, if you will, onto housing. So Chapter 9, the housing decisions, factors, and finances, housing alternatives. And so your needs, lifestyle, and financial resources will determine whether or not you decide to rent, buy, or have a home built. Those are three options, if you will. Rent, buy, or have a home built, and there are options within those options as well, as we'll get into it. So your lifestyle and choices of housing, your lifestyle or how you spend your money, your time and money is reflected in almost all consumer purchases, including, in some cases, and especially in housing. While personal preferences and taste are the foundation of your housing decisions, there are always financial ramifications or factors that will modify your final choice. So first we're looking at the opportunity cost of housing choices. Consider what you're giving up when you live in a certain area or a certain type of residence. Common housing trade-offs include such things as saving is interest lost on a down payment for a house. Once you spend it, it's gone, right? Interest lost for an apartment security deposit, same idea. Time and cost of getting to work, living in a distant area. The house might be beautiful, but the commute might be a killer for work, right? Loss of tax advantages of buying when renting. Time and money to repair and improve a lower priced home. I should say rather the loss of tax advantages of buying, of opting to rent rather than to buy. So there are tax advantages to buying. Time and money to repair and improve lower priced homes, fixer-uppers, sweat equity, etc. Time and effort to have a home built to your specifications. It takes a long time to build a house, new home, fresh from the ground up, if you will. Lots of effort going into it. So first thing we're looking at is renting versus buying. Choosing between renting and buying your residence is an essential decision related to housing always, or I shouldn't say always, but it's typically before you buy into a home, if you will, you're going through this always in your head. Economic conditions can influence this decision as well as personal desire for ease of mobility or pride of ownership. So housing information sources, if you will. As with other consumer purchases, much information is available on housing, including books, newspapers, online, Realtor.com, Zillow.com. It goes on and on and on. The availability out there for you, what's actually available. So onward, the home buying process itself. Owning a home is a goal of many people. This is part of the American dream, right? involves various activities as well as personal and economic trade-offs. So there's a cost that's associated with this, as we all know. So step one is determining your home ownership needs. What are the benefits of home ownership? The main advantages of home ownership are the pride of ownership, financial benefits, and flexibility to use the property as you see fit. What are the drawbacks of home ownership? The flip side of this, financial risks related to having to make a down payment, obtain a mortgage, and changing property values. Changing property values meaning the price can go up, but it can also go down. Limited mobility may result if a home is difficult to sell, this is especially a tough one. Higher living costs due to repairs and maintenance. So anyways, you get the idea. So onward to assessing the types of housing available. Single family dwellings are the most popular types and most desirable, if you will, in most cases, types of housing. Multi-unit dwellings include duplexes, townhouses, condominiums, can be detached, attached, etc. So a condominium is an individual owned housing unit in a building with a number of such units. Individual ownership does not include common areas such as hallways, outside grounds, and recreational facilities. There sometimes not. Sometimes is, sometimes not the case. Cooperative housing is a form of housing which a building contains a number of units, which is owned by a nonprofit organization whose members have the right to live in the units by paying rent. So you're paying rent. You're buying into the whole, the unit, the co-op as a whole, and then you're renting a specific room, if you will, or not room, but unit, I should say. Manufactured homes are housing that is fully or partially assembled in a factory before moving to a living site. These include such things as prefab homes, which can be quite amazing, and mobile homes as well, of course. Some people want a home built according to their specifications, but before you begin such a project, be sure you do your homework. Possess the knowledge, the money, and the perseverance that are needed to complete it. It takes time. Determine how much you can actually afford. So the amount you can afford to spend for a house will be affected by the cash you have available for a down payment, by the income that you have available, and by your current living expenses and financial obligations. You may not get all the features you want in your first home, but financial advisors suggest that you get into a housing market by purchasing what you can afford. Buy what you can afford, pay for what you can afford, live within your means. Studies show that most desired features in a home are typically a basement, large garage, abundant closet and storage space, and a large modern kitchen, what we all want. You may want to buy a handyman special, buy a starter home, if you will, a home that needs work, but are able to get at a lower price because of its poor condition. Step two, find and evaluate. Step two is find and evaluate a property to purchase. In selecting a neighborhood, consider the character of the community itself, zoning laws or restrictions on properties where the area can be used, or if you have a plan, if you plan to have a family, you should assess the school system. You should do that anyway. Homeowners without children also benefit from strong schools for resale values of property. Real estate agent can help you assess the housing needs. A real estate agent can also be helpful in presenting your offer to the seller, negotiating settlement price, and so on and so forth, assisting in the process as a whole, so long as they're acting on your behalf. This is something to always consider. So before reaching your decision about a specific home, conduct a complete evaluation of your property. It pays for itself having having a home inspection. You need the home inspection regardless. This evaluation can help minimize future problems, and it's also part of the negotiation process. So step three, moving on, the price of the property itself. The main factors you should consider in determining the home prices are recent sales prices in the area, the current demand for housing, length of time the home has been on the market, the owner's need to sell, why the owner's selling. Simple as that. Financing options available and the features and the condition of the home itself. Sometimes a high demand negotiating is minimized. This is a seller's market, as it's referred to, since sellers are likely to have several offers for the property. In contrast, when home sales are slow, buyer's market exists, and you would likely obtain a lower price than otherwise would be the case. Once a price has been agreed upon, the buyer must deposit what's called earnest money. It's a portion of the overall purchase, 10%, 5%. It's probably typically, I shouldn't say it's that, depending upon, anyways, it's a certain amount, a dollar amount, if you will. Price of the buyer deposits, and again, it's a sign of good faith and that you're earnest. You want to buy the home. Financing the home buying itself. Self-financing home purchases require obtaining a mortgage, being aware of types of mortgages, and settling the real estate transaction. So again, in step 4, we're looking at obtaining the actual financing, personal savings, pension plans, funds, sales, investments, or other assets, and assistance from relatives. Yes, borrow from your folks if you can, are the most common sources of down payment money. PMI, or private mortgage insurance, is usually required if the down payment is less than 20%. When you're getting a mortgage, 20% is usually the minimum. I shouldn't say it, but it's the desired amount to be putting down on a home. If you have more, put more down. If you have 100%, then you don't have to have a mortgage at all. But these are all things to consider. The PMI is that if you don't have a 20% equity stake, if you will, in the home. So a mortgage then itself is a long-term loan on a specific piece of property, such as a home or other real estate that we're looking at. Payments on mortgages are typically made over an extended period of time, for example, from 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years. So in order to qualify for that mortgage, as with any other loan, you must meet certain criteria, right? The major factors that affect the affordability of your mortgage are your income, again, other debts, the amount available, as we've already mentioned, the amount available for a down payment, the length of the loan itself, and current mortgage rates, whatever the market rates are at the time. The mortgage loan for which a person can qualify is larger when interest rates are low than when they are high. As interest rates rise, fewer people are able to afford the cost of the average price home. It's very simple. Points are prepaid interest charged by the lender. So each discount point is equal to 1% of the loan and should be viewed as a premium being paid for obtaining a lower mortgage rate. So if you qualify for a 5% loan and you don't want to pay a 5%, you pay points to knock that down from 5% down to 4% or 3%, something along those lines. So obtaining a mortgage requires potential borrower to submit an application form containing personal finance. So the bank or whomever is lending is going to want to know as much information about you and the risks that you pose as possible, right? Most lenders charge a loan application fee, and that's typically $100 to $300 for them, for their part, jumping in to evaluate you as a potential borrower. Other common charges associated with mortgage application process are loan origination fees, property appraisal fees, and credit report charges. So different types of mortgages, if you will. The conventional mortgage has equal payments over, again, time frame anywhere from 10 to 30 years. Government financing programs include insured loans such as FHA, Federal Housing Authority loans, or VA, Veterans Administration loans. Another type of loan, balloon mortgage, has fixed monthly payments and is a very large final payment. Usually after 3 or 5 or 7 years, it allows people to buy when rates are high with the hope of refinancing at a lower rate before the balloon payment is due. So you're borrowing at 5% and it's for 7 years, and at the end of the 7 years, you have to refinance the home. Otherwise, you have to pay, the balloon, meaning you have to pay the total cost, if you will. These are all mechanisms that are out there. The adjustable rate mortgages versus a fixed rate mortgage. The ARM, or adjustable rate mortgage, also refers to as what's called a flexible rate mortgage or a variable rate mortgage. It has interest rate that increases or decreases during the life of the loan based on changes in market interest rates. So they've got interest rates, market interest rates that they're kind of tied to. The cost of federal funds, the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. There are a variety of interest rates that it could be tied to. So they're included in ARMs would be a rate cap restricting the amount the interest rate can increase over the loan, the term loan, the loan of over the life, if you will, of the loan. A payment cap keeps payments on an adjustable rate mortgage at a given level or limits the amount to which those payments can rise. Convertible ARMs allow the homeowners to change an adjustable rate mortgage to a fixed rate mortgage during a certain period, such as the time between the second and the fifth year of the loan. A buy down is an interest rate subsidy from a home builder or a real estate developer that reduces mortgage payments during the first few years of the loan. In other words, you pay lower rates for X number of years, and then interest rates go up after that period of time. So a second mortgage, more commonly called the home equity loan, allows homeowners to borrow on the paid up value of the property itself. Reverse mortgages, typically older folks, elderly homeowner with tax-free income in the form of a loan that is paid back with interest when the home is sold or the homeowner passes away. Refinancing refers to obtaining a new mortgage on your current home at a lower interest rate. Otherwise, why would you do it, right? So onward, step 5, closing the purchase transaction, if you will. The closing involves the meeting of the buyer, seller, lender of funds, or representatives of each party to complete that transaction. Closing costs, or also called settlement costs, are the fees and charges paid when real estate transaction is completed. An escrow account is money usually deposited with a third party, if you will, financial institution for the payment of property taxes and homeowners insurance. So it's kind of a utilities when you have a budget plan, when you spread your equal payments, if you will, over the course of the year. Even though you use more electricity in the summer for air conditioning, it remains steady throughout the year. That's another way of looking at it as an escrow account, right? So finally, so we were talking about buying, now we're on to selling the home. And the effective presentation of your home can result in a fast, financially favorable sale. Always make sure the house is clean, so on and so forth. And gussy it up, if you will, as much as you can. Real estate salespeople recommend that you make needed home repairs, dripping faucets, and a fresh coat of paint. They sound expensive, but if you have a home, let's just say, for example, you want to sell a home for $200,000, and if you're putting $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 into that home for needed repairs just to get it up to snuff, it might be worthwhile, because otherwise that $200,000 home, if you didn't do anything, may only fetch on the market some number less than $200,000, obviously, probably less than $180,000, that $20,000 cost that you put into the home, if you will. So these are all things to consider. So next, we're on to determining the selling price. Putting a price on your home can be a very difficult decision. You face the risk of selling it immediately if the price is too high. Of not selling it immediately. Yeah, that would be a problem, right? If the price is too high, you may not get a fair settlement if the price is too low. Always that risk, it's these things that this is why you need the help, if you will, of real estate folks, etc. Adding an emphasis to that when you get an appraisal, it gives you a fair estimate, if you will, the current value of your property. It can be a good indication of the price you should set for the piece of property itself. So if the appraisal, you're thinking $150,000, and the appraisal comes in and says that your home is probably worth $200,000, fairly assessed from the appraisal, then you probably should consider selling it for around that a number closer to that price, closer to that 200,000. So selling the owner for sale by owner, if you decide to sell your home without the use of real estate professional, price the home and then advertise it through local newspapers, etc., online, through a flyer describing in detail, use the services of a lawyer or a title company to assist you with the contract, the closing, and other legal matters. So you have to have someone to step in and do that regardless, is really what we're saying. Listing with a real estate agent. So if you decide to sell your home through with the assistance of, if you will, of a real estate agent, you can probably choose among a variety of agents that are available in your area. Your real estate agent will provide you with various services, such as suggesting what the selling price ought to be, making potential buyers and other agents aware of your home, multi-listing. It's called, and it would be done online, of course, providing advice on features to highlight, helping to sell the home, of course, by conducting showings of the home and handling various aspects of the sale. Okay, so at any rate, that's just a bit. Hopefully that will help you when you take your exam. I did go over 1 hour. Sorry about that. At any rate, onward we go.